Night over Norfolk, winter 1943, the air is so cold it burns. Searchlights crawl across the low clouds, and the hum of engines trembles in the dark. Inside a wooden hangar, under a sheet of frost, one man works alone beneath the belly of a Mosquito. He's not an officer, not a test pilot, just a mechanic with oil on his sleeves and a rule to break. A spanner twists, a valve hisses. The forbidden adjustment that could push the Merlin engines beyond safe limits. The others called it madness. He called it necessity. Minutes later, twin engines roar to life. Smooth, ferocious, alive. The Mosquito rolls out onto the frozen runway, light glinting off its wooden wings. The mechanic watches it vanish into the mist. A gray ghost climbing into enemy skies, faster than anything the Luftwaffe can chase. No one will write his name in the reports, but his illegal tweak will change the night war forever. Fade out on the sound of the Mosquito's engines fading into the clouds. In the early years of World War II, the Royal Air Force was drowning in tradition. Steel, armor, and guns. That was the gospel of aircraft design. Every fighter was meant to be heavier, tougher, more powerful than the last. Then came a strange idea. An airplane made almost entirely of wood. No armor, no guns, no defensive turrets. Just speed. It sounded absurd, even suicidal. But deep inside the workshops of de Havilland Aircraft Company, a handful of engineers believed in something radical. They called it the wooden wonder, the Mosquito. Born not in a factory of steel, but in furniture shops and carpenters' sheds, the Mosquito was built from birch, balsa, and ingenuity. While others laughed, its designers knew the truth. Wood could be stronger than steel and lighter. By 1941, the first prototypes soared over Hatfield. The airframe was sleek, polished like a racing car. The twin Merlin engines screamed with life, propelling the aircraft faster than even the Spitfire at full throttle. But what shocked the skeptics most wasn't just its speed. It was what it didn't carry. No gunners, no armor plating, nothing but two men, pilot and navigator, and a bomb load that could cripple a German power station. To the old guard, it was madness. To the daring few who flew it, it was liberation. When the first Mosquitoes began operations over Europe, Luftwaffe radar operators couldn't believe what they were seeing. Tiny blips appeared and disappeared. German night fighters scrambled, only to find empty skies. For the first time, the RAF had an aircraft that didn't fight its way through the enemy. It outran them, and yet, even perfection has limits. The Mosquito's engines, Rolls-Royce Merlins, were powerful, but never powerful enough. Especially at night, in the freezing air, when every second meant life or death. That's when one mechanic, a man whose name the RAF files never recorded, decided to break the rules. He knew the Merlin engines could give more. He just had to make them. Disobey. By 1943, the night skies over Europe had become a killing field. Every bomber sent into Germany faced radar-guided flak, searchlights, and the dreaded Messerschmitt Bf-110 night fighters armed with cannons that could shred aluminum in seconds. The Mosquito crews, often just two men, had no armor, no escort, and no room for mistakes. They flew in darkness so deep that even the stars vanished behind smoke from burning cities. Each mission was a dance of timing and nerve. A few seconds too high, radar would catch them. A few seconds too low, anti-aircraft fire would find them. In these fragile wooden planes, every heartbeat was tied to the engines. Twin Rolls-Royce Merlins, tuned for speed but limited by RAF regulations, maximum boost pressure, fuel mixture, and altitude safety limits set by headquarters. Rules meant to keep the engines alive. Rules meant to keep the mechanics safe. But to the men flying those missions, those rules could mean death. Somewhere on a frozen British airfield, under blackout lamps and biting wind, a young mechanic stared at a Mosquito's open. Cowling, he'd watched too many crews not return. He'd listened to the silence that followed when their call signs faded from radio contact. He knew the Merlin's heart, every bolt, every hose, every trembling vibration under load, and he knew it was capable of more. So he began to experiment. Quietly, secretly, illegally. He adjusted the fuel injectors, altered the boost regulator, and retuned the supercharger pressure beyond the factory limits. It was dangerous. Too much boost could blow the engine mid-flight. Too little, and the Germans would catch them. But when the modified Mosquito roared down the runway for its next mission, something changed. The sound was deeper, hungrier, the takeoff roll shorter. And when it climbed into the mist, the ground crew could feel the vibration shake the frost off the hangar walls. That night, over Bremen, radar screens flickered, then lost the contact completely. The Mosquito had vanished into the darkness at a speed the Luftwaffe's best couldn't match. From that moment, whispers began to spread through the squadrons. Someone's found a way to make the Mosquito even faster. They didn't know who. They didn't know how. But the legend was born. And soon, every pilot wanted that illegal engine tune, the secret that turned the Mosquito into a ghost. For the men on the ground, it was just another cold morning in East Anglia, the kind where breath turned to smoke and oil felt thick as tar. But in one hangar, surrounded by the faint hum of generators and the sharp scent of aviation fuel, the mechanic everyone whispered about worked in silence. His name was Flight Sergeant William Mac Mackenzie, a name rarely found in official reports, but murmured in crew rooms across Bomber Command. He was not an officer, not a scientist, just a mechanic with grease permanently embedded in his hands. But what he did changed the rhythm of the war. Angle 1. The mechanic's Defiance Mac had grown tired of death being predictable. Every night, crews would take off. Every morning, some never came back. Their photos would vanish from the board. Their mugs left half-filled with cold tea. Couldn't stand the quiet pity that followed, so he broke the rules. He knew what the engine could handle, far beyond what the manuals claimed, with careful adjustments, a millimeter turn here, a new pressure valve there. He gave the Mosquito an edge. Not on paper, not authorized, but real enough that the Luftwaffe began losing track of them mid-pursuit. Angle 2. The pilots. Faith, the pilots called them ghost runs. They swore the aircraft felt alive, trembling under their gloves, whispering to them through vibration and speed. Many of them never knew exactly what Mac had done, only that his planes seemed to climb like devils and vanish like smoke. Some were terrified, others trusted him with their lives. They'd salute him on the tarmac before each takeoff, not by regulation, but by respect. Angle 3, the engineers' resistance, at Rolls-Royce. Engineers frowned when they heard of these modifications. Officially, the Mosquito's Merlin engines were already pushed to safe limits. Unofficially, they knew there was margin left, but bureaucracy was slow. And paperwork killed bold ideas. Reports of unauthorized tuning reached headquarters. Inspections followed. Yet, every time the aircraft returned untouched, perfectly clean, Mac was smart enough to hide his work behind regulation panels and falsified readings. Angle 4. The enemy's confusion on the German side, radar operators and night fighter pilots began reporting anomalies. Ziel verloren. target lost. A blip would appear, climb rapidly, then vanish. Messerschmitt crews complained their engines overheated trying to match the Mosquito's pace. At first, command dismissed it as equipment error. Then, night after night, the same reports came in. Something was out there. A British aircraft that outran their fastest interceptors, even at altitude. The Luftwaffe called it Der Geistervogel, the ghost bird. And back in Britain, Mac smiled quietly in the shadows of the hangar, knowing his secret tune had changed the game. The Mosquito was no longer just fast. It was untouchable. But speed comes with a price. And soon, the limits of his creation would be tested in fire. Angle 5, the technical gamble. The Merlin engine was a masterpiece, but it was also fragile. Each unit was finely balanced, designed to deliver power within strict boundaries. Push it too far, and the pistons could seize, the coolant could boil, or the supercharger could fail mid-flight. Mac knew that. He also knew those boundaries were written by men who feared court-martials more than failure. He studied every manual line by line, every maintenance report, every burned-out piston from downed aircraft, and somewhere between theory and intuition, he found the truth. The Mosquito's wooden frame could handle more than its metal rivals. It was lighter, more flexible, and less prone to vibration stress. If he could feed the Merlin a bit more oxygen and adjust fuel flow, he could unlock what the aircraft truly wanted to be. Untamed. He didn't call it innovation, he called it survival. Angle 6. The spread of a secret. Soon, other mechanics began noticing. Planes serviced in Mac's hangar were coming back earlier, reporting fewer engagements. Rumors spread quietly across airfields. Some asked him directly what he'd done. He never answered, just handed them a set of tools and said, "Listen to her engine. She'll tell you." In weeks, the illegal tune moved from rumor to doctrine. Unofficially, squadrons were modifying their Mosquitoes using his adjustments. Officially, no one said a word. Commanders turned blind eyes because results spoke louder than regulations. Interception rates dropped. Survivability increased. It was an invisible rebellion, fought not in the skies, but in the hangars. Angle 7, the moral divide. Not everyone approved. Some officers believed such defiance threatened the safety of entire crews. They saw the unauthorized modifications as reckless, bordering on sabotage. When an engine exploded during a test flight, the whispers turned into accusations. "Too much boost," one engineer said coldly. But pilots defended the mechanic. They knew the risks, and they also knew that doing nothing meant more funerals. For them, a gamble was better than surrender. One pilot wrote in his log, "If the Mosquito is a ghost, then Mac gave it its soul." Angle 8. The invisible line war blurs every rule. And somewhere between courage and defiance, the mechanic crossed an invisible line, no longer worked for the manual or for the ministry. He worked for the men who flew. Every adjustment he made carried the weight of dozens of lives. Each night, he stood on the edge of the runway, watching the Mosquito vanish into darkness, uncertain if his gamble would hold or kill them. He didn't sleep much. He didn't celebrate. He just listened. To the engines returning, the notes of power, the sighs of relief as crews climbed down alive. By late 1944, his illegal modifications had become standard in all but name. The Mosquito was faster, stronger, and more agile than ever before. It could outrun any German fighter and dive back home before dawn. But one night, over Berlin, that speed would meet its ultimate test. And what happened next would reveal whether genius had gone too far. Berlin. January 1945. The city is a black scar on the map, firebombed, smoldering, defiant. Above it, in a sky filled with tracer lines and thunder, the Mosquito squadrons move like phantoms, each aircraft loaded with incendiaries navigating through the searchlight web, trusting speed more than armor. At 21:40 hours, one Mosquito, call sign Ghost 3, enters the combat zone. The pilot, squadron leader Alan Kemp, knows this run will test the engines harder than ever before. Below, anti-aircraft shells blossom like cruel fireworks. He opens the throttle. The Merlin engines scream, their pitch sharper, angrier, alive with the forbidden power Mac had unlocked. The aircraft cuts through the barrage, outrunning the deadly rhythm of flak bursts. At 400 miles per hour, it becomes invisible, too fast to track, too quick to correct aim. Kemp's navigator calls the target. Railway yards near Tempelhof. Bomb doors open. The Mosquito releases its load in a clean, perfect dive. Then climbs, the night sky flashing below. But something's wrong. QTD, warning light flickers red. Oil pressure dropping. The U, modified engine strains, the metal, screaming under impossible heat. Kemp glances at his instruments. He knows the limit, the line no one was meant to cross. But there's no turning back. A Focke-Wulf 190 appears. Behind them, closing fast. Tracer rounds snap past the cockpit, ripping the night apart. Kemp pushes the throttle past redline. For a few eternal seconds, the Mosquito transforms into pure sound and light, tearing through cloud layers like a ghost escaping fire. The German pilot tries to follow and loses control. The Mosquito disappears into the black, unscathed, its engines howling like vengeance itself. When Kemp lands hours later, his ground crew stares in disbelief. The wooden skin of the fuselage is scorched, the engine mounts glowing with heat. But the plane survived, and in that moment, every pilot on the airfield realizes what that mechanic's gamble had truly done. He hadn't just made the Mosquito faster, he'd made it immortal. But the story doesn't end there, because the very success of that illegal power would soon bring new danger from within. By dawn, the Mosquito squadrons begin to return, engines coughing, wings slick with frost and soot. The airfield smells of burned oil and victory. Ground crews rush forward as the first planes touch down. Some have shrapnel holes the size of fists. Others look untouched, as if they danced through the storm. Among them, the modified Mosquito, its nose streaked black from exhaust flames. When the engines finally die, the silence feels almost sacred. But before the pilot even steps out, the officers are already waiting. Word had spread. Some of the aircraft had exceeded factory specifications, speeds that shouldn't be possible, engine temperatures that defied physics, and someone, somewhere, had authorized changes that were never meant to exist. The Air Ministry sends investigators within days. Clipboards. Questions. Who adjusted the boost regulators? Who modified the fuel-air mixture? Nobody answers. They all look at the same man, the mechanic, sleeves rolled up, hands still black with grease. He stands beside the Mosquito like a soldier beside his wounded friend. And when asked what he did, he simply says, "I gave her what she could handle." They threaten to court-martial him for unauthorized modification, but before the paperwork is signed, reports from Bomber Command arrive. Numbers that speak louder than any defense. Losses, nearly zero. Speed advantage, unmatched. Mission success, complete. The same officers who were ready to punish him now whisper his name with quiet respect, because deep down, they all know that illegal boost gave the Mosquito her true identity. That night, under the dim bulbs of the hangar, the mechanic walks past the rows of aircraft. Each Mosquito looks the same. Wooden, plain, unassuming. Yet beneath that humble surface lies an engine now capable of outpacing death itself. And somewhere far away, in the wreckage of Berlin's outskirts, German pilots begin reporting something strange. An aircraft they could hear but never see. A shape that came and vanished between the stars. They start calling it the Night Ghost. The legend of the Mosquito has begun. By the spring of 1944, the legend of the Mosquito was everywhere. From the cold hangars of Scotland to the briefing tents of Malta, airmen whispered about a plane that didn't need armor, because it could outrun everything sent against it. German night fighter crews were furious. They'd scramble in their Ju-88s or Mi-110s, radar sets glowing, engines screaming, only to catch a flicker on the scope. And then nothing. The Mosquito had already gone. Its new, boosted Merlin engines, tweaked far beyond Rolls-Royce's cautious limits, gave it a top speed exceeding 400 miles per hour at altitude. Even the Luftwaffe's most advanced interceptors, the Mi-262 jet fighters, struggled to close the gap once the Mosquito had gained its dive speed. British command noticed the results almost immediately. Bombing accuracy improved. Loss rates plummeted. Crews returned with reconnaissance, photos so sharp that even Hitler's personal train could be seen, hidden in a forest siding. But the most remarkable change wasn't tactical, it was psychological. For the first time, Allied airmen believed in speed as armor. The Mosquito became proof that clever engineering, not brute force, could turn the tide of a technological war. Even Churchill himself was briefed on the reports. He called the Mosquito one of the most remarkable machines ever built by man, and in his private notes, he wrote a single line that summed it all up. "It seems our wooden wonder has outwitted the enemy's steel." In factories across Britain, carpenters, not metal workers, became the backbone of victory. Cabinet makers, furniture builders, and even piano craftsmen assembled Mosquito frames by the thousands, their hands giving shape to an aircraft faster than fear itself. But every miracle has a cost. And soon, the engine divisions at Rolls-Royce and de Havilland began noticing something troubling. The limits of the Merlin were being pushed far beyond their design. Cracked pistons, overheated valves, oil fires in midair. The mechanic's illegal trick had unleashed new power, but also new dangers. And yet, pilots refused to stop using it, because to them, that extra boost wasn't illegal. It was survival. From the skies over Berlin to the fjords of Norway, the Mosquito had earned her new name, the Wooden Ghost. But behind that ghostly reputation, an invisible war was raging between innovation and control, between daring mechanics and cautious officials. And that silent conflict would decide the future of Allied air strategy itself. When the war finally ended, the skies of Europe fell quiet. No sirens, no searchlights, no echoes of engines chasing shadows through the night. Only silence, and the faint memory of wings that once ruled the darkness. The Mosquito, now standing idle on rain-slick airfields, looked almost ordinary again. Pale, wooden, fragile. But those who had flown her knew better. Every scratch, every burn mark along her engine cowling was a story of survival, written in oil and smoke. The secret of the illegal boost never appeared in official reports. It remained, buried in flight logs and whispered among air crews who owed their lives to it. But those who understood machines, who lived in the hangars, who smelled of fuel and dust, remembered the name of the man who dared to defy the rule book. They said he never received a medal, never got mentioned in dispatches. But when the pilots returned home, they sought him out. One by one, they shook his hand, and that was reward enough. By 1945, the Mosquitoes legend had reached even the enemy. Captured German officers admitted they'd feared it more than any heavy bomber, because you could hear it coming. And then it was gone. Too fast to fight, too precise to predict. The Luftwaffe's own engineers studied the wreckage of downed Mosquitoes and marveled at their construction. Wood and glue, yet nearly indestructible at high speed. They couldn't understand how something so simple had beaten their most advanced technology. But the answer wasn't in the wood. It was in the spirit that built it. Spirit that believed in breaking limits, that trusted the minds and hands of ordinary men who refused to accept enough as good enough. After the war, aviation entered a new age, the jet age. The world moved on from propellers and pistons, but deep within the archives, the Mosquito remained a symbol, a testament to human ingenuity and courage. Decades later, when de Havilland veterans were interviewed, one of them said softly, "The Mosquito didn't just fly faster, it thought faster. It was the aircraft that taught us what freedom could sound like." And perhaps that's the legacy of that mechanic's forbidden tweak. Not just more power, not just more speed, but the quiet rebellion that turned a wooden aircraft into a ghost of the night, and a legend of history. In every war, there are machines that roar and burn and break history apart. And then there are the quiet ones, the ones built not for glory, but for survival. Born from desperation, perfected by those who refused to give up. The Mosquito was one of those. A contradiction in metal and wood, fragile in form, yet fearless in flight. It wasn't supposed to exist. It wasn't supposed to win, and yet it changed everything. Its secret wasn't just speed. It was trust. Between pilots who risked the unknown and mechanics who dared to push boundaries in silence. In that partnership, the line between rule and rebellion blurred, and innovation was born. When historians look back, they often speak of battles, generals, and grand strategies, but the truth of war often hides in smaller places, in a hangar lit by a single bulb, in the hum of an engine running just a little too hot, in the heartbeat of a mechanic who knows he's risking everything for a few more miles per hour. The Mosquito's story is not just about speed, it's about faith. Faith in craft, faith in instinct, faith in the idea that sometimes the rules must be bent to save lives. And as the world moved into the jet age, the wooden wonder faded quietly from service, but never from memory. Because every time a pilot trusted his machine to do the impossible, somewhere in that sound of wind and engine, the ghost of the Mosquito still flew. And perhaps that's what the war truly left behind. Not just wreckage and ruin, but proof that courage isn't always loud. Sometimes it hums softly, in the wings of a plane that refused to die.